the ACE2 receptor, the receptor and virus would then be sucked into the cell, and the virus then hijacks the cell's biochemical DNA, RNA, protein synthetic mechanism to replicate itself. Remember, this virus is an RNA virus, and viruses by nature are obligative intracellular parasites. They have to get into the cell and use the cell's mechanism to replicate themselves. Now, I'm going to move then to a little introduction to the immune system. Our immune system is wonderfully put together by infinite wisdom. We have the thymus, which is the source of a group of white blood cells called T lymphocytes. There's the bone marrow. The bone marrow produces another type of white blood cell called the B lymphocyte. Then there's the spleen. And don't forget that you have the lymph nodes and all that. Don't forget that in the intestine, there are bacteria, friendly bacteria, and they impact on the lymph nodes and lymphoid follicles in the gut, where a considerable amount of the immune system is, and is impacted positively or negatively by gut bacteria. If you have a healthy gut bacterial flora, it impacts positively on the immune system. When we look at the immune system, we usually look at the innate response. And of course, I just mentioned the lymphocytes. You have white blood cells called neutrophils. You have lymphocytes, T lymphocytes, that would have come originally from the thymus or impacted upon in the development by the thymus. The B lymphocytes from the bone marrow. Other cells called monocytes, and they can change into macrophages. And now when we look at the first line of defense, tissue macrophages move towards a virus or a bacterium, any invading microbe, and the tissue macrophage will swallow or engulf. We use the term in medicine, phagocytosis. Phagocytosis, the macrophage will go and engulf or swallow the virus. And then when it does that, it breaks down the virus into smaller components. Then you have neutrophils. They move into to invade and complement the attack of the macrophages. Monocytes go in and turn into more macrophages. So the macrophages are there engulfing the virus, the very first line of defense. But then we notice something as we get to this point. At this point, the bone marrow now begins to, over a 3 to 4 day period, produce more white blood cells, whether they be B lymphocytes or neutrophils, depending on whether they're dealing with viruses or bacteria. And now we come to an important consideration. Before we go any further into the immune system, because once the macrophages engulf the virus and break it down in small bits, then these macrophages express the various pieces that the virus would have been broken down into on their surface on an MCH receptor, and that will then be recognized by the T lymphocytes. And the T lymphocytes are powerful and important, and the T lymphocytes will begin to assess these pieces of particles that the virus would have been broken down into by the macrophages, and the T lymphocytes then start to multiply and attack the virus. Now at this point, everything is moving smoothly because you want the immune system to attack the virus. Now, why is it that in some people there is an over-explosion, to put it simply, of the immune system, what some experts call a cytokine storm, and that explosion of attack of inflammation creates considerable, sometimes terminal, fatal damage to the lungs and other tissues. And in other people, the immune system attacks the virus, there is not an excess of inflammation, and they get over the virus fairly smoothly with a minimum or even at most a moderate degree of illness? These are important questions that are being constantly researched. Various experts have various opinions. Research is going on, opinions change. But we do understand that in some people, it is this excess inflammatory response called a cytokine storm that is responsible for a lot of the damage. And in others, it doesn't occur. And if they have a strong immune system, they deal with the virus without the excess inflammatory response and get over and get through fairly well. So we're going to look at how the immune system can attack the virus, and at the same time, look at why in some people there is just a moderate inflammatory response, and in others, this severe so-called cytokine storm. We have to explain what cytokines are in a minute. But let's go back to the virus, and the virus attaching itself to the cell via a receptor called the ACE2 receptor. ACE means angiotensin converting enzyme number 2, ACE2 receptor. Now, to understand the importance of that receptor, and by the way, that receptor is abundant in the cells of the respiratory tract and the lung. It is also abundant in the blood vessels and in the gastrointestinal tract. Important, because those 3 areas are areas which the virus can definitely dwell in and attack. Now, to understand the importance of this ACE2 receptor on cells that the virus connects to and enters the cell, to understand the significance, we need to go back a little bit and look at a little bit of science here. So follow me as I go forward here. Now, there is a system in the body called the renin-angiotensin aldosterone system. Don't worry too much about the words. I know this is just a church talk, but I'm explaining some important basic science. Now, the liver produces a protein called angiotensinogen, and the kidneys produce an enzyme called renin, and the renin from the kidneys convert angiotensinogen to angiotensin 1. And then angiotensin 1 is converted by an enzyme called ACE1, angiotensin converting enzyme 1, to angiotensin 2. And this angiotensin 2 is quite a dangerous fellow. It causes the blood vessels to narrow. We call that vasoconstriction. It increases a hormone called aldosterone, which causes the kidney to retain salt and water, pushing up the blood pressure. Most importantly, this angiotensin 2 is pro-inflammatory and pro-fibrotic. That is, it can trigger and enhance inflammation and cause fibrosis or scarring. It also can increase vascular permeability. That is, it makes blood vessels leak out fluid. And it is a pretty dangerous little molecule, angiotensin 2. And there are certain high blood pressure drugs that are aimed at reducing this angiotensin 2 or blocking its impact. They're called the ACE inhibitors or the angiotensin receptor blockers, valsartan and ramipril and so on. That's by the way. So there's this angiotensin 2, which when it is in excess can cause trouble. But why am I telling you all of this? Well, let's get back to the ACE2 receptor, to which the virus binds and then is engulfed by the cell to infect the cell. The thing about ACE2 is that ACE2, this receptor on our cells, this ACE2 has a normal physiological function. It just happens that it is also the entrance point or the receptor through which the virus enters the cell. But this ACE2 converts angiotensin 2, which is the bad guy, the bad molecule, into 2 other molecules, angiotensin 1 and 7, which are anti-inflammatory, anti-fibrotic, and which are good. So notice then that angiotensin 2, when in excess, can cause a lot of trouble, inflammation, push up the blood pressure, retention of salt and water, leakage of blood vessels. But ACE2 converts angiotensin 2 to angiotensin 1 and 7, which are good and healthy and are anti-inflammatory and control and balance the inflammatory system. Okay, now this is where we come to a crucial point. When the SARS-CoV-2 virus attaches to the ACE2 receptor on cells, it reduces the number of these ACE2 molecules or receptors on the cells. Because once the virus attaches to ACE2, the whole virus ACE2 complex is swallowed by the cell. So the ACE2 receptors, if a person gets an attack of this virus, COVID-19 disease from SARS-CoV-2, the number of ACE2 receptors and therefore molecules on the cells will be drastically reduced. Now, if you're following, you can see what will happen. Since ACE2 normally has a healthy physiological role to convert angiotensin 2, the bad molecule, into angiotensin 1 and 7, which are good, healthy molecules, which are anti-inflammatory and anti-fibrotic, that is anti-scarring, and which balance the immune system. When this virus attacks and attaches via ACE2 and causes a massive reduction of ACE2 in the cells, then there is no significant amount of ACE2 to deal with angiotensin 2. And the angiotensin 2 is therefore present in excess and can trigger and enhance inflammation, leaking of blood vessels, and all sorts of trouble in heart and blood vessel dynamic system. So right away you see that this virus attaches to a very important molecule as its receptor. It uses it as its receptor, but this molecule is very important for our normal physiology of the immune system and cardiovascular dynamics. This molecule is the ACE2 receptor, and the ACE2 receptor must convert angiotensin 2 to 1 and 7 and keep the blood vessel dynamics and the heart dynamics and the immune system dynamics and inflammation well balanced and under control. So the first thing that this virus does is that in order to enter the cell, it will attach to ACE2, which it uses as a receptor, but ACE2 is normally a very important molecule for us. And by using ACE2 as its receptor, right away, the virus reduces the ACE2 receptors or molecules on the cells and begins to throw the immune system and the cardiovascular dynamics out of balance. Now, this brings us back to the immune system. When, as I said before, a virus enters the body and the macrophages attack the virus and swallow it and breaks it down into small particles, these macrophages do a number of things. They produce some molecules called interleukins, interleukin 1 and 6 and 12. Interleukins play an important role in attacking viruses and bacteria and so on. But when in excess, they can also attack normal tissue where the virus may be. Now, this is where the problem is. So you're going to produce, you're producing these interleukins, and you're producing another molecule called tumor necrosis factor, and you're producing other proteins called cytokines, and all of these will attack the virus. But when in excess, all of these can cause damage of the tissue that the virus is in, tissue like the lung, the nice alveolar air sacs, and there is a little delicate membrane between them and the capillaries. That membrane is the interstitial area, so you can get inflammation and damage in the air sacs of the lung and the little interstitial area between the air sacs and the capillaries, causing massive inflammation, scarring, damage, destruction to lung tissue. This happens in a few people, and this is the major cause of severe disease and death. This pneumonia, this viral pneumonia, causing severe inflammation, destruction, fibrosis, scarring, inflammatory exudate in the lung. Now, A little bit more about that before we get to the immune system balancing and what we can do. The neutrophils come in and they aid in the inflammatory process, but those macrophages, they break down the virus into smaller pieces and present these smaller pieces to the T cells. And the T cells, the T lymphocytes, which are powerful, begin to assess the various bits and pieces that the virus would have been broken down into and begin to multiply. And as they multiply the T cells, they attract more macrophages. And as more macrophages come in, the macrophages stimulate the T lymphocytes to keep multiplying. And you get a cascade of increasing inflammatory cell production looking to attack the virus, but when in excess, cause severe inflammation and destruction of tissues. Now, these interleukins and cytokines normally would be held in check by ACE2 as one of the arms of the immune system balancing. ACE2, which converts angiotensin 2, we mentioned that 5 minutes ago, to angiotensin 1 and 7. ACE2 reduces and balances any inflammatory response. But we just said that the virus, in attaching to the cell, uses ACE2 as its receptor, and therefore ACE2 is tremendously reduced, leaving the immune system, if it has to respond in an imbalanced way. And this is what happens in some people, a few people, much more than others. Of course, there are genetic and hereditary factors here, and we will come to an important point soon. So we come now to some important facts that have come out. Recent research would have been showing you that certain underlying chronic non-communicable diseases predispose to more severe disease or even death. Obesity is one. High blood pressure is another. Diabetes is a third. Any atherosclerosis in the arteries, that's the fourth. And chronic kidney disease is an important fifth. And of course, chronic kidney disease, of course, is caused by the same high blood pressure and diabetes over a long time out of control. So obesity and diabetes and high blood pressure and atherosclerotic heart disease and chronic kidney disease, when those underlying conditions are present, the immune system not only is dampened, but it is also deranged. And usually in these people, the same angiotensin 2 is in excess, and the same ACE2 is already under strain before the virus comes in to knock it out altogether. And therefore, they're the ones more prone to severe inflammation and destruction of the lung. So we want a strong immune system to attack the virus, but we want a balanced immune system. I'm using lay terms, a balanced immune system so that the excess inflammatory response will not result in a cytokine storm. This is the term they use, where cytokines and interleukins and all of these molecules, which normally, when they're balanced and in moderate amounts, will be good for killing the virus, but when they're in excess, will cause severe tissue inflammation, scarring, and destruction of lung tissue and elsewhere in the body as well. So this brings us now to an important point. I'm going to look first of all at vitamin D. Vitamin D. Now, you can go and do your own research. Everybody is free to do that. There are a large number of studies over the years. At first, some of these studies were thought to be controversial, but more recent studies have shown that vitamin D is very important, not only for calcium and bone metabolism, as we were taught in the early years in medical school, that vitamin D is very important for the correct and balanced functioning of the immune system. Vitamin D. Whole host of papers. You can look at the British Medical Journal, journals out of Europe and America over the years looking at one or two facts, listen to them, that people with low vitamin D levels were found to be more prone to any respiratory infection and even also to bacterial pneumonia. And then they found that as the levels of the blood of in vitamin D in the blood rose, there were at less risk for these respiratory infections, whether viral or bacterial. So the research continued, and they found that a blood level of 20 nanograms per ml was definitely too low on people with a blood level of vitamin D of 20 nanograms per ml or less would be very prone to respiratory infections or to pneumonias. They found that the level of 40 nanograms per ml is key, but you can go up to 80 to be really strong and balanced in the immune system. We're talking about vitamin D. Now, here are some important facts. People who are white-skinned make more vitamin D in the sun than people who are dark-skinned. So watch it now. It has been found that in the United States of America, 42% or more of people are deficient in vitamin D. Now watch it. And of those, 82% of blacks in America are vitamin D deficient. So in the winter months, when there is little sun, or whatever sun there is, you have to be inside keeping warm. It means that levels of vitamin D will fall even lower in the winter months if people are dependent on sunlight for making their vitamin D. And sunlight does make a lot of vitamin D in the skin if you get adequate sunlight. And most people do not. So this brings us to an important point. Other researchers, and you can search the papers, just Google vitamin D and respiratory infections, and a whole host of reputable research papers will come up. Much research has shown that you can supplement with vitamin D, and you can supplement with levels to bring your blood level up to 40 nanograms per ml, and above that towards 80, which would be extremely good. The experts recommend 5,000 international units of vitamin D a day. And as a matter of fact, you can do some research for me. You can go and Google something called the vitamin D hammer, a wonderful paper produced in which people who were low in vitamin D and had severe respiratory infections from whatever cause were given a high dose, 50,000 units of vitamin D for a few days, called the vitamin D hammer, and then came back down to a maintenance dose, and they showed remarkable improvement from the complications of whatever respiratory infection, viral or bacterial, they might have been in. You know, going back to the old time days, the old time people used to talk about putting tuberculosis patients in the sun. That was ancient wisdom. We now understand the mechanism there, because in those days there were no antibiotics, no modern understanding. But for example, one of the president's relatives, Washington, came down here to get some sunlight, hence you have Washington House. So we now understand the rationale there was the vitamin D being made in the skin by the sunlight. So taking a supplement of vitamin D to increase your vitamin D level up to 40 nanograms or towards 80 nanograms. And of course, vitamin D not only is so good for the immune system and to balance it, but it helps to reduce the risk for cancer and other systemic inflammation. And because a lot of people are walking about today with systemic inflammation caused by bad diet, fast foods, excess sugar. Sugar is very dangerous to the immune system. Sugar actually paralyzes the neutrophils. Sugar dampens the immune system. That is why diabetics are so prone to trouble, because the diabetes, the high sugar, paralyzes the white blood cells. And at the same time, in diabetes, there's an attachment of glucose to proteins called glycosylation. And this glycosylation is responsible for the kidney damage, the vascular damage, and damage to the immune system. Similarly, in hypertension, the angiotensin 2 is usually upregulated, and that makes the hypertensive person more prone to excessive inflammation. So it is too in chronic lung disease, and I forgot to mention chronic lung disease. Asthma increases the risk of severe problems, but chronic lung disease coming from cigarette smoking and pollution, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease like emphysema and chronic bronchitis predisposes such persons to severe troubles and fatality. Now, back to vitamin D. Let's look at how wonderful vitamin D is to be taken to keep your immune system strong and balanced. First of all, we mentioned the angiotensin 2, that bad guy, that bad molecule, which is produced by renin acting on angiotensin, and so on. That's the chemistry. Angiotensin 2 predisposes to inflammation and high blood pressure and poor cardiovascular dynamics. Listen to this. Vitamin D inhibits or actually switches off the gene responsible for making renin. And if there is less renin, you're going to make less angiotensin 2. And if there's less angiotensin 2, you're going to be less likely to have excessive inflammation in any scenario at all. So right away, vitamin D reduces the amount of angiotensin 2 that you'll be making because it suppresses the gene responsible for making the enzyme renin, which converts angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2. So vitamin D right away reduces angiotensin 2 levels. That's why it also helps in high blood pressure, and has been shown that vitamin D helps to reduce cardiovascular disease having nothing to do with this virus. So vitamin D reduces angiotensin 2 levels and therefore tilts your balance away from excessive inflammation or from being chronically inflamed. The next thing that vitamin D does in terms of this virus, vitamin D increases the expression of the gene responsible for making ACE2. Now, ACE2, I told you before, ACE2, angiotensin converting enzyme 2, ACE2 is very important for getting rid of angiotensin 2 by converting it to angiotensin 1 and 7 and reducing any inflammatory tendency. And ACE2 is the receptor for the virus. Now, angiotensin 2 is dealt with by ACE2, but ACE2 is also the receptor for the virus. But listen to what vitamin D does. Vitamin D increases the number of ACE2 molecules. Well, you may say, well, that means you have more receptors for the virus to attack. All right, but if you have more ACE2, you're going to be better able to get rid of angiotensin 2 and keep the immune system balanced. But vitamin D isn't finished yet. The third thing that vitamin D does, so remember one, it helps to reduce the angiotensin 2 production. It increases the amount of ACE2, and ACE2 is good. And just in case you're asking, well, if you increase ACE2, would you have more receptors for the virus to attach? And the answer is theoretically yes. But listen to what vitamin D does. Number 3, vitamin D increases the levels of 2 important natural defense molecules. They are big words. One is, the simpler one is called a defensin, a molecule called defensin. They are called defensins. The other one is called cathelicidins. So defensins and cathelicidins are proteins that are produced by the macrophages or innate natural immune cells. And listen to what cathelicidins and defensins do. They go and cover the spike protein on the virus so the virus cannot connect with ACE2. So look at the wonderful things that vitamin D does. It reduces the amount of angiotensin 2, it increases the amount of ACE2, and it enhances the production of 2 important defense mechanisms, cathelicidins and defensins, that go and cover down the spike protein on the virus so the virus cannot attach to the ACE2 to get into the cell. You can't beat vitamin D as an immune strengthener and an immune balancer, 5,000 units a day. And even in children, we can be at anywhere, they say, between 500 and 1,000 units. Teenagers, the same 5,000 units, because a lot of people in the world are vitamin D deficient, even here in the tropics, because our skins are darker. We don't make vitamin D as faster as white skins. And then we now work in air-conditioned rooms. We don't get as much sunlight. Children now grow up playing games in the house rather than running about in the sun as we did when we were younger. So a lot of people, as a matter of fact, one researcher said this: while there is a COVID-19 pandemic, there is also a pandemic of vitamin D deficiency. And there is no coincidence between the fact that you see an increased Black mortality compared to white in the USA. That has to do with a lot of factors, of course, including chronic non-communicable diseases, which are more common there. And it brings us to another point. We've been stressing over a long time that people need to follow a healthy lifestyle. Cut out the sugars, eat less, exercise more, watch their body fat, keep slim. Obesity is very, very dangerous. Cut down the salt, eat a lot more fruits and vegetables, nuts and grains, move away from the fast foods and the refined processed carbohydrates, and eat more fruit and veg, nuts and whole grains, exercise and get adequate sleep. All of these are important principles in keeping the body healthy on the whole. More fruits and veg, nuts and whole grains, moving away from animal fat and red meats. And now we see the importance of sunlight. Remember the New Start formula, there is sunlight. And we see the importance of supplementing with vitamin D3, 5,000 to 10,000 units a day. Some experts say if your vitamin D level is low, you can start with 10,000 units to build it up, and then 5,000 units a day. Vitamin D is so important at strengthening and balancing the immune system and helping you to be strong against any respiratory virus. Not only this one, the flu and colds, and also helps to reduce the risk of cancer, helps to reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease. Vitamin D3. Just to move on a bit, I would have mentioned in a previous talk that when there is this cytokine storm, which vitamin D will definitely help to prevent, when there's this cytokine storm, the cell has other mechanisms to try to quench the excessive inflammation. One of them is the glutathione peroxidase system in each cell, which is made up of glutathione, a tripeptide which requires cysteine, which is hard to get, and selenium. And I mentioned before, therefore, that N-acetylcysteine and selenium will boost glutathione levels in the lung and the liver and help to strengthen cells against damage and destruction and help to quench any overexplosion of the immune cytokine storm. Glutathione peroxidase, hence the importance of N-acetylcysteine and selenium. Vitamin D, absolutely crucial. We just went through that. Vitamin C. At first, there were some people who were saying vitamin C wouldn't do anything and anything, but no, adequate research, and there are lots of research papers showing that vitamin D helps to keep the immune system strong against even chronic non-communicable diseases, but against cancers, against viral infections, and bacterial infections. And most people wait until an infection comes to start vitamin C. You should be taking vitamin C consistently. Lots of fruits and vegetables, that's the natural source. And there is nothing wrong with supplementing with vitamin C between 1 and 4,000 milligrams a day. As a matter of fact, although it is controversial among the experts, there are those in the USA and some of those in China who've been using intravenous vitamin C. But that is a matter that the experts have to be looking at. But vitamin C, we know, at adequate blood levels strengthens the immune system and also helps to balance it. It is not just strengthening, it is keeping the immune system in balance so that the tendency for an overexplosion called the cytokine storm is lessened. So vitamin C, N-acetylcysteine, selenium, the important role of vitamin D we mentioned, sunlight and supplementing. Don't forget the basic principles: more fruit and vegetables, nuts and whole grains, keep away from sugar and excess salt, drink more water, adequate sleep at night, and daily exercise. Very important. Just sitting down and doing nothing, sedentary lifestyle, weakens the immune system. Exercise strengthens the immune system, and a good night's rest strengthens the immune system. Lack of sleep interferes with the immune system. And sugar, as I said before, tends to paralyze the immune system. So there we have it then, that we can strengthen the immune system and balance it with vitamin D, vitamin C, N-acetylcysteine, giving cysteine, selenium for the production of glutathione peroxidase. And now we come to zinc. Zinc is important because not only is it involved in a whole host of biochemical reactions, but it is important in the bone marrow and in the spleen and in the white blood cells for them to be functioning well. And the thing about zinc is that when adequate levels are present, it can exert an interference with how fast viruses can replicate. You need adequate levels of zinc. Zinc, vitamin D, vitamin C. You need the selenium for your glutathione peroxidase, and it can boost that with N-acetylcysteine. Adequate rest, adequate exercise, a good diet, plenty of fruit and veg, avoiding the sugar and the refined processed carbohydrates and the fatty, greasy foods, eating more wholesome and simple foods, avoiding obesity, because obesity is a risk factor for everything. And now in this COVID, it is a risk factor for severe disease and the other chronic non-communicable diseases as well. Now, another important thing I need to mention in terms of keeping the immune system strong is vitamin E. Vitamin E also plays a role in replenishing vitamin C and also plays a very important role in balancing, helping to prevent that excessive inflammatory spike. And now I've mentioned vitamin E, I'll mention a very important molecule called resveratrol that comes from red grapes or red grape juice. Resveratrol is very important for the health of the cardiovascular system, the heart and blood vessels. But resveratrol is one of those molecules that tends to switch off the excessive production of angiotensin II, which, as we said earlier on, is the bad guy. So resveratrol, your grapes, red grapes, and you can actually buy the supplement, resveratrol, helps to switch off angiotensin II and supports vitamin D in that regard. And also resveratrol is very protective of the cardiovascular system, and it helps to reduce inflammation. So we have a whole number of natural molecules and foods and herbs like turmeric. Turmeric is anti-inflammatory, and curcumin, anti-inflammatory, of course. And then we have the omega-3 from flaxseed. The omega-3 alpha-linolenic acid helps to tilt the immune system away from excess inflammation. Certain herbs like oregano and cabbage, sage, and all of those herbs give a variety of molecules that are anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, and therefore help to balance the immune system and prevent a cytokine storm. We should learn from this pandemic that those who are most vulnerable for severe disease and increased mortality are those who are obese, hypertensive, diabetic, chronic kidney disease, chronic lung disease, and also those with a low level of vitamin D in their blood. And a lot of Americans are vitamin D deficient. Therefore, an active lifestyle, exercising in the sunlight in the morning, drinking enough water, more fruits and veg, adequate sleep, adequate exercise, sticking to a proper lifestyle health reform, and supplementing where necessary with vitamin D, 5,000 units a day, vitamin C, at least 2,000 milligrams a day. Very importantly there, yes, children can, the recent research I just checked is that teenagers can take anywhere between 2,000 and 5,000 units, and even children can take between 500 and 1,000 units, depends on their age. But vitamin D, very important. That was answering a question that popped up on the screen there. Vitamin D, children up to age 5 can safely take 5,000 units a day. Up above age 5, they can go up to 1,000 units a day, especially if they are in cold northern countries. Down here, they should be running about in the sunlight and having their sunlight and so on. But we know that there's a change away from that compared to the old time days. So these are all things you can do to strengthen, and not only strengthen, but to balance your immune system. You want your immune system strong enough to attack the virus, but not imbalanced, so there is a cytokine storm that will cause inflammation, pneumonia, destruction, scarring, and fibrosis in the lung, which is the major cause of death. Why some people never go to that point and others do would have to do with not only the factors I've discussed, but with genetic and hereditary factors, which we are still looking at in terms of research. You don't know which group you might be in. You might be a person who might catch the disease and have very little symptoms. You might be a person who might catch the disease and get severe symptoms, even if there may be no underlying factors. We don't know all that is involved. It's a mysterious phenomenon. But we do know that if the immune system is both strong and balanced, with those lifestyle factors I mentioned, adequate sleep, exercise, enough water, lots of fruits and veg, whole grains and nuts, avoiding obesity, and then the importance of vitamin D. I cannot overstress the importance of vitamin D. Very important for strengthening and balancing the immune system. Vitamin C. And before I get to that, somebody's asking about asthma. I just saw a question there on turmeric. Whether it is the whole turmeric or the powdered turmeric, it doesn't matter. It's good enough. But of course, turmeric, the curcumin in turmeric is not that easily absorbed. So you can get a supplement of curcumin. There are supplements available that enhance absorption to get a good absorption of the curcumin, which is powerfully anti-inflammatory and will definitely help to balance the immune system and reduce any overexplosion of inflammation. Zinc, you can't overdo with zinc. Anywhere between 25 and 50 milligrams should be adequate. There are side effects with excess zinc. There is a problem with too little. 25 to 50 milligrams of zinc comes right there in the middle. If your diet is not good, you may need 50 milligrams. If you're already eating cashews and nuts and grains, you might not need any at all, because almonds and cashews and walnuts are good sources. Pumpkin seeds, fruits and vegetables, all these give all of these things in good amounts, as well, a healthy diet. So that's zinc. In terms of asthmatics, of course, asthmatics have to be very careful to protect themselves against respiratory infections and against this SARS-CoV-2 COVID-19 disease. And again, it has been shown that vitamin D and E, as well as omega-3, helps to reduce any excessive inflammation, even if it is allergic inflammation. And the asthmatic will do well to follow all of these principles to strengthen their lung. They should have their inhalers and be using the inhalers as their doctor prescribes. They should be keeping away from the allergens and being very careful that any problem at all to seek medical advice and medical attention. So strengthening the immune system is very important, and not only very important strengthening the immune system, but it is important to keep the immune system strengthened and balanced all the time. And any more questions? I gather that there's some questions. Now, let me come to one other point here. The decaffeinated green tea contains polyphenols. We don't want the caffeine, but the decaffeinated green tea contains polyphenols, just like resveratrol, which are very powerfully antioxidant and anti-inflammatory as well. And don't forget, peppermint tea also contains some of those anti-inflammatory molecules. The citrus with vitamin C and lemon, the skin, also contain bioflavonoids. Somebody asked if there's any negative effect on the body with, let me get that question again, with low vitamin D. Well, we just mentioned that, but you're asking about excess. No. Well, if you keep around 5,000 units a day of vitamin D, no problem. It can go up to 10,000 if your diet is deficient or if you have a problem. If you know your lifestyle has not been quite right and you want to build up your level, 10,000 units a day for a while, then go back down to 5,000 units. There are some experts who say that we've been frightened against vitamin D by wrong science for a while, and that the vitamin D is very crucial. A lot of people have been frightened to take adequate amounts and have their systems deficient. Vitamin D, very crucial in strengthening and balancing the immune system and dealing with this COVID-2 virus we mentioned. Remember the three things it does. Angiotensin 2 is turned down because vitamin D inhibits the enzyme renin, which produces angiotensin 2 via angiotensin 1. Vitamin D increases the ACE2, which, although it is the receptor for the virus, is a very important molecule normally. And vitamin D increases cathelicidins and defensins, which cover the spike proteins on the virus, preventing the virus from attacking the receptor. So vitamin D is such an important immune stimulating vitamin against the virus. Strengthens the immune system, reduces inflammation. So vitamin D, C, zinc, your selenium, the N-acetylcysteine, remember curcumin from turmeric, very important in being anti-inflammatory. A healthy lifestyle, fruits and veg, nuts and grains, avoiding the sugar and the excessive salt, avoiding the fast foods, adequate rest, adequate exercise, a whole approach for a healthy lifestyle, strengthening the immune system and keeping you on top so that if you do get this virus, you're able to fight it off in a balanced way and give yourself the best chance of recovering. But the important thing is not to catch it. So remember the hand washing, the wiping down of surfaces, the locking down and staying at home, and of course the important social distancing to prevent the spread, very important to prevent the spread. And then, of course, strengthening your immune system that just per chance you get the virus, you have the best chance of knocking it over. And don't forget, this epidemic will pass, this pandemic will pass, others will come. We are in that time for us who are believers in the Bible. We're in that time when things will happen. So we have to keep our immune system up, not just in this pandemic, but all the time. Any questions, comments?
Yes, I have a question, sir.
Okay.
Two questions, rather. In terms of the relationship of dandelion as a plant with its high pH level, would that be an effective way of making sure that I can combat the virus if I take that in tea form every day? Because I'm learning that the pH level of that is like 3 times what the pH level of the virus is. And then my second question would be, in comparison to being out in the sun as versus taking the actual vitamin D, how long would I need to be out in the sun on a daily basis to be in comparative relation with the 500 with the amount of vitamin D I would have to be taking in tablet form or liquid form? Those are my two questions.
Okay, thank you. The second question is easier of the two. Sunlight, they say half an hour to 40 minutes of the morning sun is quite good. There was a chap in the USA who put somebody to stand up in the hot sun between 1 and 2, and that person made 14,000 units of vitamin D in that hour. A white-skinned person, of course. But you have people have to worry about excessive sun exposure and skin cancer and so on. But the early morning sun, an hour, if you can afford that time, would be good. But it is still advised, given our constraints of work and so on, to supplement with 5,000 units a day. The other question on dandelion and pH, you hear a lot of talk about pH and so on in the body. It is, of course, good to eat fruits and vegetables and those herbs and so on. Very good, very important. And they all help to balance the immune system and strengthen it. In terms of what the pH does, you have to wait for more research on that, because we do know that eating your vegetables and so on helps to keep you from being excessively acidic, which is always good. But it is more important in terms of the immune balancing and strengthening all of those herbs, dandelion are the ones you mentioned. Okay? Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Are children with non-active asthma are as vulnerable to COVID-19 as children with active asthma?
Please repeat that. I didn't get it fully. Please repeat. Sorry.
Are children with non-active asthma are vulnerable to COVID-19 as children with active asthma?
I am not sure of any research thoughts on that, but I would assume that if a child is asthmatic and mild and non-active, they will be at less risk than a child who is actively getting attacks. But both would have to be still careful in doing what they can to strengthen the immune system and being under the direct advice of their healthcare professional.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question. If
Go ahead.
someone,
Thank you.
yes, well, doctor, you recommended 1,000 to 4,000 IU of vitamin C a day. But if someone takes over 4,000 IU a day in vitamin C, is there any adverse effect on the body?
If you look in the textbook, you will see theoretical issues with vitamin C like kidney stones and diarrhea. If you check the literature, you see that, in fact, those theoretical side effects are minor in terms of percentage. So you can go up to 3,000 milligrams of vitamin C a day without any problem. If a person is sensitive, they may have to use the calcium ascorbate called ester C. And if a person has a history of kidney stones, they may have to be careful. But otherwise, in normal healthy individuals, up to 3,000 milligrams of vitamin C a day is no problem.
Thank you.
Doc,
You're welcome.
Doc,
Yes, sir.
the taking of vitamin D and K2, is that a good combination?
Yes. Vitamin D is very good for the cardiovascular system and the immune system, and vitamin K2 helps to offset any rise in the calcium by helping to get calcium out of the setting of going into arteries, like in atherosclerosis, and back into bone. So that combination is good. Because, vitamin D in very excessive amounts can cause hypercalcemia, because it can cause the excessive absorption of calcium. If a person is so prone, vitamin K2 would balance that. A minute left. Any other questions? I hope that the information given would have been beneficial. Our usual health message, the overall approach to healthy lifestyle, your fruits, your vegetables, your exercise, your rest, adequate water, avoiding sugar and salt and animal fat, watching obesity and keeping slim and fit, and of course these important molecules, vitamin D, so crucial, zinc, vitamin C, and then of course the vitamin E, selenium, and N-acetylcysteine, and all your herbs, your curcumin, all the herbs and nuts and grains and seeds, given a variety of antioxidants and anti-inflammatory molecules. You can't beat a good, healthy diet, and then these important supplements. And today, focus on the importance of vitamin D. So I want to thank you very much. And as we put these into practice, and of course, don't forget the prevention, social distancing, staying at home, wiping down surfaces, frequent hand washing. And while we do that, keep our immune system in tip-top shape. I want to thank you very much, and all who would have listened.
I have a question.
Yes.
The person or persons suffering from the autoimmune disease and psoriasis, would vitamin D, its exposure to the sunlight and the supplementation be of much benefit to that condition?
Yes, vitamin D is recommended in any of the autoimmune diseases. You see, you have certain autoimmune specialists who actually recommend it to their patients, whatever drugs they're on. Some of them may be on various immune balancing or suppressive agents, but they still recommend vitamin D. Yes, always good to help balance and reduce inflammation, vitamin D. So thank you, and God bless.